Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan P. Butler. I hope that your new year is going well here. I'm recording this actually on New Year's Eve of 2014. We're heading into a big year for Star Wars 2015, and of course we've already pretty much looked at the different releases of the original Star Wars films. So we want to sort of head into some oddball territory with the next few episodes to keep this series alive as we are waiting for things like a Season 1 set of Rebels. Now, as I mentioned, it is the new year. Hopefully yours went well. Ours kind of sucked. Between me being sick, losing a transmission on a vehicle on Christmas Day, cracking a tooth that I need to get fixed and whatnot, if you can overlook that a little bit. It's been pretty crappy. But before the latest round of big financial slaps across the face happened, it just so happens I was in a position to acquire some new things to add to that Star Wars Home Video Library collection. That collection that, of course, you see behind you there off to the right side of your screen, to my left. So, I'm going to take a moment to take a look at these. You're going to see a series of episodes here, this being the first of this new batch. We're going to be taking a look at some old versions of the VHS and Betamax versions in an upcoming episode that'll be slid into earlier in the playlist here. So if you're watching this, be sure you also check that out. It is earlier in the playlist at this point. It'll be episode 3.2. We're going to take a look in our next episode at the first of these official parodies we're going to look at, which will be Phineas and Ferb's Star Wars. But in this episode, we want to take a look at something that's a bit of an oddball, but opens up another realm of Star Wars home video collecting, and that is Emmy Screeners. Now, you're probably familiar already with a version of the films that we talked about recently, well, relatively recently, as we were going through the progression of the original trilogy. In 2004, the original trilogy was released on DVD for the first time. This is that widescreen set from the time that we've taken a look at. And of course, there was a full-screen version to go along with it. They didn't get rid of the whole let's do a widescreen and full-screen release on DVD thing until the 2008 releases that were only released in widescreen. Now inside each of these, among the films themselves, you had a bonus disc, right? This is our bonus disc here for the widescreen set. And of course, there's the same thing for full-screen. The only difference there really between the two being the color, right, silver or gold down there at the bottom. Now, of course, the highlight of this, and the reason why someone would want to pick up the 2004 DVD sets instead of 2005's DVD sets, is the fact that there is that bonus disc in there. And the bonus disc had various things, video and still galleries, trailers and such. But more importantly, it had a documentary on it called Empire of Dreams. Now, Empire of Dreams is a very cool documentary. It takes you through the development of the original Star Wars film, A New Hope, and then, to a degree, into the development of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It's mostly about the build-up to A New Hope, but it does include all three of them, taking us basically through the mid-70s up through the mid-1980s, which is a pretty cool concept. And it's a nice, long, in-depth documentary with a lot of interviews with members from the cast, members from the crew, and members of basically what you think of as sort of like the media part of society. People like Steven Spielberg or Walter Cronkite talking about the impact of Star Wars on them, on society, on filmmaking, and so forth. One of the best Star Wars documentaries that most fans would say they've ever seen. It's really, really well done. Well, it wasn't just available here, though. These were released in September. Just about a month later, the special actually aired on television. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. If the whole point of getting them on DVD in this particular set was for this exclusive documentary, how are they going to turn around and just immediately put that on television? That's not exclusive, is it? Depends on your point of view. It's the exclusive home video way to get it as opposed to getting it on television in that case. You did get it earlier here. And remember, this was the first home video release of the original trilogy on DVD. So for most people, it wasn't Empire of Dreams that made the difference. It was getting the films in this particular media, or this particular medium, for the first time. Now, what's interesting is that when it actually aired on television, it aired on A&E. Okay? And when A&E aired it, they aired it as they would often do with a long documentary, right? They schedule a 2-hour time slot. You have the actual documentary slid into the time slot, and of course, they're going to show commercials. So the actual documentary gets pared down to about an hour and a half. So you figure, oh, it's an hour-and-a-half documentary, they put it on the DVD, they put it on television, no harm, no foul, no big deal. Thing is, the version that's on the DVD is about 2.5 hours long. Now, do the math, right? That means an entire hour of content that you get on the DVD version was cut completely out of it in order to air it on television. It makes an interesting kind of dynamic here, because usually what you would see is something that airs on television. Then when it shows up on home video, it's perhaps expanded. Something like the Clone Wars episodes, getting those expanded editions, director's editions, whatever. The extended cuts where it's literally cuts, because it's usually stuff like decapitations or impalements that they couldn't show us on Cartoon Network. So you got kind of a weird pair of things going on here, right? Usually you would think of home video as more expansive than what you get on television, which in this case, it is. On the other hand, though, you usually figure the second time you get something is when it's expanded versus the first time, whereas in this case, it's the opposite. You get on a home video first, and it was the expanded version. It was a cut-down version that aired on television. It's much more like just a movie being released in theaters, and then to fit it within the runtime of showing it on television, they cut some scenes or cut some quick transitions or something out of it. It's much more like the way you would handle a movie on television than usually you would see a documentary, because documentaries are usually designed with television in mind as they're putting them together. But then again, that's sort of the culture we're in right now. Things like History Channel, Discovery Channel, and things like that sort of lean us in that direction. But not in this particular case, not in 2004. So the good news is, if you're someone who wants to see this, if you want to see the best version of it, it's the easiest one to get, right? It's the 2004 DVD sets of the original trilogy. But let's say you want to see that more pared down version, and you want to add something odd to your collection. Well, it turns out that because this aired on television, it was put up for Emmy nominations. It's actually nominated for, I believe it was sound mixing, sound design for a documentary. And it didn't win, but it was nominated, and that means that the entire process of putting this out there, if you want to solicit this to the members of the groups that do the judging for the Emmys, whether it's daytime, primetime, whatever, you have to actually send out copies of your stuff to those people who are judging. And then they go through, in theory, watch them, and don't just immediately stick them on eBay. And that's how they try to make their decision. And some companies go all out and really try to make this all kind of glitzy. Some just send out straight copies of the stuff for the people to see. It just kind of depends on what the company wants to do and how much effort they want to put behind trying to get an Emmy for that particular item. It's the same thing they do for the Academy Awards, really. Well, in this case, A&E took their television-aired version, which is the only one they could submit, of course, because it has to have been something aired on television for an Emmy, and submitted that. And you call those submitted versions that aren't official releases screeners. Probably heard that term plenty of times before, usually referring to things that are bootlegs online, because a lot of these wind up online. Somebody takes these screeners, makes some burned copies of it, and starts selling bootleg copies of a movie before it ever comes out. A lot of times with stupid images, right? Like those bootleg copies of the Star Wars films where you see like Arnold Schwarzenegger on the cover for no freaking reason. But the general concept of screeners is they are legal, but they're not really things that are meant to be sold at the time. They're meant to be used for judging purposes. Well, eventually, a lot of these do wind up finding their way onto the market, whether it's eBay or elsewhere, and in this case, I happen to manage to get both versions of this on home video through the screener versions. And in this case, by both versions, I mean both formats in this case, right? They are two versions, right? The DVD, the official DVD from 2004, and then the screener, but I'm talking about two different versions of the screener. The most common version of the screener you're going to tend to find for Empire of Dreams is this, right? C-3PO there, he's actually on the side as well, on both sides, not on the back. It says Star Wars Empire of Dreams up at the top, it's got the A&E logo down at the bottom. The side, same thing, right? Star Wars Empire of Dreams in the logo, other side, same thing. On the back, it says, for your consideration, Star Wars Empire of Dreams, Outstanding Nonfiction Special, and all other categories. Basically saying, we'd like to win the big one for nonfiction, but we'll put it in for everything, so please pick us for something. They didn't, but they nominated them for the sound. Has different comments there. Says, very well done. Must viewing. San Jose Mercury News. Sprightly. Yes, sprightly. A fabulous treat. Chicago Tribune. Engrossing. Christian Science Monitor. Holy Yoda, this is fun. Detroit Free Press. Unusually well done and thorough. AP. And then fascinating. A rich look at all the things that could have gone wrong. Gannett. And of course the symbol down there, and underneath, real tiny print down at the bottom, says, not for resale, for screening purposes only. Yeah, and then they tend to put these things up on eBay anyway. As for the tape itself, again, this is a VHS version. Flip it over here. It says again, for your consideration, Star Wars Empire of Dreams Outstanding Nonfiction Special, not for resale, for screening purposes only. Copyright 2005, AETN, A&E Television Network. There's no frills or anything to this. I mean, it is just straight up the hour-and-a-half version of the documentary. You pop it in, you watch it, it's done. That's it. We'll get into some of the differences here in just a second. Given that this was 2005 when it was being considered, it had aired in 2004, of course, we're in the era of DVDs. So we have a DVD screener of this also, but not with the elaborate packaging here. Essentially just in a little shell case here. I've seen these a couple of times, always in this. So if there was any other type of paper thing that this was in originally, anytime I've ever seen it on eBay, it hasn't been with that. It's just been in one of these, so I'm assuming this is how it was sent out, but take that with a grain of salt. I can't confirm that for you here. The disc itself, I mean, it's just pretty much the same thing, right? For your consideration, Star Wars Empire of Dreams. Whoop, other way there. Outstanding Nonfiction Special, right? And then down at the bottom, not for resale, for screening purposes only. And you got your A&E logo there. There's nothing special about the disc or anything like that. I mean, it's just a standard DVD disc here. If you put it into your player, this thing actually just starts immediately playing. There is a menu. If you were to go to it, you have to manually go to it. It just says A&E, TN, A&E Television Network, and has the different chapter listings. But it's like Chapter 1, Chapter 2. It almost looks like something that you could put together on your own home computer. Nothing special. It's not really something you would assume anybody's even really going to go to, because like I said, you put it in the player, it immediately starts playing. You get to the end, it's just done. It's a very, very basic, bare bones type of presentation here. Because again, it's just for them to watch the documentary and decide if they want to vote for it. Now, like I said, there are some things that are different between the two different versions of it, because they had to cut an hour worth of material. There's some moments where they highlight things like the Del Rey novelization, the Marvel Comics adaptation of A New Hope. That's pretty much all cut out. They've done a flip-flop as to some of the early material talking about A New Hope and then talking about ILM. They sort of flip-flop those so that ILM comes at a different point within this. It comes at a later point than it does on the full version of it. There's some interview bits that are cut out. Professor Leo Browdy gets more time in the one that you actually see on the DVD than he does when it comes to the aired or screener version of the thing. Walter Cronkite, one of the preeminent news people of the last century, he's nowhere to be found in the screener version of it. So all of his little interview bits and all the comments around it aren't there. You got more just kind of fun little goofy clips and whatnot. The stuff talking about, for instance, there's no underwear in space, and some of the joking amongst the cast and crew on set. A little bit of that is taken out. A comment by Anthony Daniels about how if Lucas had told him faster, more intense for C-3PO, he could do it faster, but more intense would be unbearable because it's C-3PO. Those types of things are taken out. In general, you get the same storyline, so to speak, but a lot of the peripheral stuff, the joking, a little bit of the detail about the marketing aspect of it and so forth, those are the types of things that are removed, right? They want to kind of contain the essence of the documentary for release, but not have it go so long they had to schedule more time. It's only going to fit into a 2-hour time slot, so it's only an hour and a half long. Now, I did literally watch this on DVD on both versions at the same time to do a comparison the way that I do with, for instance, the Clone Wars stuff. And for the most part, where there are those cuts, you'll tend to see, for instance, either just a clean cut, or maybe there's a little bit of narration that is in a slightly different place on the longer cut because now it moves into a shorter version of the next scene and so forth. Every great once in a while, you'll see a scene in which it's basically the exact same thing being said and the exact same length of the scene, but there's a slight difference in the images they're showing. Like, are they showing marketing materials versus are they showing, I don't know, a movie poster again for a little bit longer, that sort of thing. Oddly enough, I would say that even though there's an hour worth of content that's not there on the screener, I think someone watching it, especially watching it on TV back then, versus watching it on DVD is going to find the experience is very similar. No, it's just not one of those things where what's taken out significantly harms the viewing. It's just more in-depth when you watch the one that's on the DVD. So for those of you who want to watch the documentary, I would just pick up the 2004 DVD sets, obviously. But if you're looking for something odd to put in the collection that is one of those rare Emmy screeners that you actually can get your hands on a little more easily, take a look, go on eBay and places like that, look for Empire of Dreams. You can tend to find it fairly often, again, usually in VHS form as opposed to the DVD form. These show up much more rarely, but they do tend to show up on there. It's just an odd thing to add to any Star Wars home video collection. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers. Nothing particular. Whoopsie!